You know, most people who are victimized as a young kid will feel an X on them because it doesn't stop. It's typically not an incident. And for me, the instability of 14 schools, 17 different homes, all the different stepfathers coming in, you know, one's a murderer, one was in prison, you know, one escaped. I mean, just the craziness of it. You believe that becomes normal as a kid. Again, you can't process this right. But for me, I will say this, I never wanted to give up because I just kept thinking, when I'm older, I want to have a good life.
Victor Marx survived the upheaval and abuse he suffered during his youth, growing up to become an excellent shooter in the U.S. Marine Corps, a martial arts master, and a weapons instructor. Now he uses his lethal skills to heal troubled youth. Victor Marx next on Long Story Short.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in high definition.
Aloha mai kako, I'm Leslie Wilcox. Victor Marx is known for many things, including his 7th degree black belts in Keijudo Karate and Jiu-Jitsu, 4th degree black belt in weapons, and a record time in fastest gun disarm. A resident of California and the founder and president of All Things Possible Ministries, the Louisiana-born Marx once operated a martial arts business in Honolulu at the Ward Warehouse. At the time of our conversation in 2015, Marx travels around the world, offering hope to young people who are suffering from abuse. Before he was able to become an inspiration to others, though, he had to first recover from the severe trauma of his own childhood. In a way, it started even before he was born, in Lafayette, Louisiana.
You know, I was born in the 60s, and I had 3 siblings already. And my mother, who was young, she had her first child at 16. Their marriage didn't make it. They were divorced when I was born. And my father actually, you know, became a drug dealer and a pimp. And the night that I was conceived, he actually put a gun to her head. Didn't claim me when she was pregnant. He actually told her, "That ain't mine." Didn't even call my kid. He said, "That ain't mine." Because of, she had gotten into other relationships already. And then the next man she married, we call him Mr. K in the book. He, you know, this wasn't like some drug dealer on a street corner. This was an educated man who had served in the military, who had been in counterintelligence.
So he seemed like a respectable man?
Correct. And at the time, he actually even owned a bookstore, a college bookstore. Hemingway was one of his favorite reads, and you know, my mother, I think she was 22 at the time, 4 children, you know, she's thinking, okay. But something intuitively, he was kind of messed up.
He was horrifying. He would torture you.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you know, there was perversion, but there was also intentional, what the experts would say, torture. You know, being electrocuted. Being dunked in a tub until I would pass out. I remember waking up on the cold bathroom floor to him breathing into my mouth, and I'm sputtering, and he just said, "Boy, don't ever forget, I'm the one that gives you life." And those are what I call lies based in reality. And until you really come to exchange those out for what the truth is, a person will remain really hamstrung by what's happened as a childhood, because that's implanted into you, it becomes part of your fabric. Because as a kid, all you can process is, I wasn't breathing, I am now. He was the one dunking me in the tub, holding me in. I guess he does give me life. Actually, I thought he was my biological dad. I wasn't told till, you know. But I don't really share this publicly, so he wanted to seal what he had done to me in the way of protecting himself. Abusers will always use fear, the fear of death and whatnot. And he actually had brought me to a house one night out in the country. early morning and brought me, it was a little wooden house, and there was a single light in it. There was another guy, and there was a hole in the floor. There was a wooden floor, and then the hole that had been dug. And I thought at that point, this is when I'm gonna die. And you know, fear is a different thing. When you've experienced terror all for a while, your mind associates, there's no fight left in you. You just yield. And for him, he was having a conversation with that man, and I remember hearing the guy say, "I don't want to do this anymore." And my stepfather was he was a very good communicator. He made him relax. He said, "Oh, I understand." When the guy relaxed, he hit him, he cracked him, and knocked him unconscious. And he was a fighter. He was a boom. He drops. He handcuffs him. He drags him up to this hole, pulls him up on his knees, handcuffed, and he pulls out a pistol, his pistol. He said, "Come here, boy." And he put the gun on my head. And he said, "You're gonna shoot this man." And he raised my hand, and the guy is semi-conscious, and he sees what's going on, because I think he thought this was what was going to happen to me. And now it's happening to him. And, you know, I have the pistol to the back of his head, and I remember trying to pull the trigger, and I couldn't. And I don't know if it was the pounds per square inch. You know, 7. And, but I'm squeezing, and I can't pull it. And then I feel his hand come over and grab my wrist. And then his right hand comes around, and he slips his finger over mine, and he presses until the revolver goes off. And when it fired, it hit the guy in the back of his head, and it killed him. And then, you know, he pushed his body into the hole. And he told me, "Boy, this, you know, it's your first kill."
Wow.
And he buried him, and he took that pistol and wrapped it in a handkerchief. And he said, "If you ever tell anyone what I've done to you, it doesn't matter how old you get." He said, "I will tell the police that you killed this man, and I have the pistol with your fingerprint on it." And he said, "They'll electrocute you." And I knew what electrocution was, because he had done it a few times. And so it sealed and instilled in me a fear where I never talked about that until I was an adult.
What a horrible thing. And your mother didn't know this? Any of this stuff was happening?
She did not know.
Victor Marx acknowledges he can't substantiate this account. He said he as a kid did not know the location, the body was never found, and the crime was not reported. Marx's mother finally escaped from her marriage to Mr. K, but she continued to marry men who were abusive to her children. By the time he finished high school, Victor Marx had already been in trouble with the law. Rather than go to jail, he made a decision that took his life in an entirely new direction.
You didn't join the Marines because you wanted to.
Well, yeah, it was, again, at that point in my life, I had just graduated high school, hallelujah. And, but I was spiraling, using drugs, fighting, and stealing. Again, for me, stealing was my way to say, this world owes me, and they're gonna start paying me back. And every opportunity that I could take advantage, I would. But I got caught, and I was looking at, you know, I was looking at being sentenced because of my, you know, stealing and getting in trouble. So my best option at that point was to join the United States Marine Corps. And I did, and that's what really kept me from going to jail, because they would have prosecuted me. And the Corps was a very good thing for me, because one, it was structured, disciplined, and it showed me life isn't about being fair. So just, you know, suck it up, buttercup, and time to do the deal. And it worked for me tremendously, and I really liked the Marine Corps. Never loved it, but I liked it. So much I put ink on my shoulder. And And you know what? They were able to teach me skill sets I didn't have before, which gave me a level of confidence, including starting to train in the martial arts, shooting. You know, I hunted as a little kid, but when they taught me how to put 10 rounds on the able target of a man from 546 yards without a scope,
wow,
that gave me a skill set that, you know, felt good. And again, there was drivenness there because I'm training martial arts, karate, jiu-jitsu, kempo, judo, anything I could, boxing, because I said, if I can't beat a man this way, I'll beat him this way, because I never want to get hurt again. So that was kind of my driver.
And you did well, but you didn't want to stay in. You left after, what, 3 years?
Yeah, I did one term of enlistment, and I'd actually got in trouble while I was in, which I was facing, you know, big time. Again, there was a pattern, because you can only do things for so long, but your character and your behavior is going to tell on you. And I was in trouble, was facing some stuff, and actually, this is when my biological dad came back into my life, which is really the redemptive aspect of this whole deal. You know, really an absentee father all my life. At that point, I'm 20, but really engaged me, apologized for not being a father, and which blew me away. He wanted to call me son in the letter, which made me mad because I thought, you don't have a right to call me son. But he told me he had a spiritual encounter that really changed his life. And it's not about perfection, but the direction of his life had changed. And so much so that he said, why don't you come visit me? And the Marine Corps actually let me go visit him because they knew the circumstances of what I'd, you know, never known him. And they just said, you come back to face your court martial. I said, okay. And I'm like, don't you? I said, I'll be back. And I went, and it was interesting getting to really spend time with him in depth.
Because this was the pimp. This is the guy who held a gun to your mother's head.
Yeah.
Guy who wouldn't claim you.
Yeah, by all means, he was a loser. He was a loser as a father, and had justified his own absentee. So here he is. His life, I can tell, is different. And again, not perfect, but different. And he cared about me. And I knew he wanted to make a new start. So I gave him an opportunity. And it was really through seeing his faith of a life change that, you know, it really impacted me so much. So I had a life change through faith. And he goes, I told him, I said, well, I'm going back to face a court martial. What should I do? And I had developed an elaborate lie. It was a pretty good lie. Try to get me out of it, which it wouldn't have, but your mind thinks it will. I'll never forget, he looked at me, he said, son, learn from me. Just tell the truth. Because a lie, you got to keep it going. You eventually, and I was like, okay. I went back and I actually told him the truth, which, you know, I didn't fight it. I said, I'm guilty. You know, and I told him, I said I was going to lie. You know, I said, but here's the truth. I did this, and I deserve my punishment. And they were actually so taken back because my nickname, my handle in the Marine Corps was Thumper.
Because you were a hothead.
I was a hothead. I tell people it was because I liked the little Bambi bunny, you know, in the movie, the little bunny Thumper. But it's because I like to thump people back then. And so they were all shocked, and I'll never forget the commanding officer who presided over it. He said, well, this is a shock. And he goes, you are going to pay the price for the crime you break in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He said, but I'm going to suspend the sentence. You won't have to do break time, but I'm going to keep you, you know, to your barracks, which was unbelievable. And it really was the first time in my life, that I thought telling the truth is a better way to go.
And was your dad for real? Had he really had a conversion?
He did.
He changed?
He did, which it stuck all the years until his passing, you know, 20-something years. And again, I'm grateful that coming to faith or putting, you know, finding a higher power, it's not about perfection, but the direction of your life changes. And you know what? It not only worked for him, it worked for me.
Victor Marx's acceptance of his father didn't turn his life around immediately. He would still have to come to terms with the trauma of his childhood before he could start to put it behind him, and his newfound faith would play an important role in his healing.
I can see you saying, why did God allow all that to happen to me? Why couldn't he have kept me from some of it and distributed it equally?
Right. You know what? That is such a great question, and one that anybody who's suffered, it's an honest question.
Right.
It's
why,
valid.
it's the old why me question,
Yeah.
a variation of.
Right. And for me, it came in a dramatic form where, because I'd been to church as a kid, and there was a thing, Jesus loves all the little children of the world, read right. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I believe that, because he's good, so he loves all the kids, just not me. That's how you start to process it as a kid, because bad things happen. And I'll never forget when it changed for me, and it was actually a counseling appointment. As a result of it, this old country boy counselor, boot-wearing Texas guy, and he's just like, hey, but he had all kind of degrees on his wall, so he knew what he was doing. He just said, well, where was God in all this? If he's so loving, why did he, and he can stop evil, why did he allow it to happen to you? He said, why don't you ask him? And I remember telling him, you need to shut up. That you need to just stand down. That's not a question. I need to ask God. And he's like, why not? Because, and this is real and it's deep, but people who've been, people who over a lifetime or a number of years have experienced disappointment and failure again and again and again, and you assign it to God. Why didn't you give me a better break? Why don't you give me better parents? Why? I'm stuck in how, or whatever it is. To ask God that question, for me, I'd rather have a false hope than not have the right answer and have my hope dashed forever. And people in their heart know if they're living off a false hope. Well, and it's okay, but the reality is in your heart, you're just too scared.
Well, I can also see you having a really difficult time with this, because if God is your heavenly Father, well, the fatherhood record was really bad on this earth.
And it is hard not to assign that to. I remember when someone first told me, oh, well, God is your heavenly Father. It was so offensive to me. I thought, negative. You kidding me? But in my mind, I thought, well, he must be some sadistic, crazy, unloving God. So maybe somebody else, I'm the stepchild. I'm getting the leftovers. But what changed my life and the lie that I'd believed is I finally asked God that question.
What were the circumstances of asking him?
I was in a counseling appointment, and I just said, God, where were you? Jesus, if you're so loving and you love the kids, what about me? Why did you allow it to happen to me? I'll never forget, I remember my eyes were closed and I saw a room where a lot of abuse had happened. And I saw it so clearly. I saw my stepfather had a beer in his hand. He had a belt wrapped around his hand. He was getting ready to, beat me with it. He had me laid out on a bed in my underwear. He would just, it was, and I saw everything so clearly. And then I saw what I knew to be an image of Christ, a spiritual being appearing. And I thought, okay, great. Now turn and touch my stepfather's heart and blow it out. Kill him right now. That's what I wanted, remembering this, but it wouldn't have been the truth. It would have been my own fantasy. The reality of what really happened to me was right before he got ready to hit me, my stepfather is rearing back. I'm grabbing the sheets, because the way he would hit you, he'd hit you, bam, and then he would wait. He'd wait till all your little muscles relaxed from being tense and anticipation. He'd relax and boom, he'd hit you again. And he'd do it slow until you gave up, till there was no more fight in you. And right before he hit me, this image of Christ turned, kneeled, and placed his body on top of mine and sunk into mine so that he would take the greatest part of the beating for me to allow me to survive. And I knew if that's a God who loves me and will share my suffering, that's a God I can trust. I think God's heart breaks for all the injustices that happen, all the evil. That's not what he wants. It's never what he's assigning to children. You know, it's the choice of evil people making horrible choices.
Victor Marx turned his skill in martial arts into a business, and he started teaching karate. He met Eileen, another believer, and a nationally recognized fitness instructor. She was at the leading edge of fitness kickboxing. And soon they began working together, opening their own gym after they were married. An invitation from a youth pastor in Honolulu to teach a Christian karate school brought Marx and his growing family to the islands. Despite all the good things happening in his life, he still could not shake the horrors of his past.
I like that martial arts is, good martial arts, does have a way to teach a person a code of honor and understand the impact you can make on someone. So I've used it for good. When we had our martial arts center here underneath, the spaghetti factory at the Ward Warehouse as one of our locations, we had so many people come in to fight me because I'm this highly from the mainland and, what are you doing here? Some things got physical, which changed some people's minds. I hurt some people's feelings because they tried to get physical. But I made more friends. I was able to use my words, not necessarily my fists or arm bars or chokes or cracking somebody, but it gives you a level of confidence that in a situation, I'm looking at a young guy who's like, oh, you're supposed to be, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
You sound like you speak Pidgin.
Oh,
you got that inflection.
Hey, we were here long enough. My children were raised here, my first three. When we went back to the mainland, and I forget, my son's out playing in the yard, pick up, he comes back, he's playing with kids there, he goes, Dad, he said, there's so many white kids here. I said, come here. I said, you are white. He's like, ah. I said, he had his Pidgin, still talks Pidgin. So I love the islands. I love the Ohana here. We consider this home. We spent so many years here, through good and bad times.
How many years here?
We were here 95 to 01.
And you say some of them weren't good years?
No, I had challenges emotionally that people didn't know about, right? It was part of my healing. It was when because I excelled, in martial arts, in many ways, I'd reached the pinnacle, at least for myself. Here in Hawaii, huge student enrollment, large staff. We were making impact. Because after we got over the few things, people realized, oh, you care about our keiki. And then training adults on it, yeah. We had brought the fitness kickboxing here. It was just great. It was a great time. But I was having emotional problems hidden. And I would never tell anybody. Nobody knew that I was at Queens in an observation room because I had horrible thoughts about hurting myself or other people, But I chose in that moment to go, I'm so unstable at this moment. We lived at the top of Tantalus, and man, I was having bad thoughts about how I have a good insurance policy, and I'm causing so much pain for my wife, through my behavior and all this, and maybe I should just end it, let her take the money and go. And I tell people, when someone wants to commit suicide, it's not always just a rash deal. Sometimes it seems like a logical answer. But I tell folks, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Don't give up. Get help. And I did, particularly that night, by driving down, checking myself into Queens, and I'm glad I did.
So you're saying that when you accepted God, accepted Jesus into your life, it wasn't like it took away all your pain and problems?
It took away my past sin, because that's what he promises, to lift the burden. That's what the scriptures say. But it didn't take away the challenges I would have because of my past But the greatest thing is he promised me he would redeem it. And I love redemption. You know, redemption is when somebody drinks a soda, throws a can side of the road, somebody else comes by and says, hey, this trash to you, but this money to me. And that's how God did for me. He picked me up. He said, other people consider you trash. I'll redeem your life. Watch what I do. And again, sometimes the greatest faith is just never giving up.
Do you have flashbacks?
Seldom anymore because of the counseling and therapy I've gone through, but I still feel deeply. And what I'm glad about now is my suffering has been turned, that purpose, I've learned the purpose, there is a purpose in the pain, is to help others who are still suffering and to give them hope. And that's what I feel like I'm called to do.
Through their All Things Possible ministries, Victor and Eileen Marx have dedicated themselves to advocating for youth who are troubled and abused. They help people, including war veterans who have suffered trauma, and they travel around the world to facilitate the rescue of children who've been abducted and trafficked. Mahalo to Victor Marx, now of Murrieta, California, for sharing your stories with us. And mahalo to you for joining us. For PBS Hawaii and Long Story Short, I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ahui ho.
For audio and written transcripts of all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org. To download free podcasts of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, go to the Apple iTunes Store or visit pbshawaii.org.
You know, my story is one of redemption. And because a lot of people experience abuse and injustice in their life, but I'm pretty happy to share. That's why we do it so much. And actually, I didn't do it till later in life. I was in my late 30s before I started telling my story.
Is that because you didn't want everyone to know the gory details?
Yes, I stayed away from it because really, in a lot of ways, I hadn't healed from some of the trauma of the past. So you use coping mechanisms, whether it's excelling at a certain thing or staying away from other things so you don't get triggered, or never wanting to revisit any of that. I kind of used all of them and in that way to protect myself. But when I took time and really trusted that the process of going through healing and counseling would make the greater difference in my life, it's turned out really good, not only for me, but helping others.